And it's because of the nuance of a breakup. And I don't know what this is going to lead to. I don't know what else is going to go on.
Everyone had been whispering about him long before the cameras even started rolling. So when his name began surfacing again, nobody was really surprised. The rest of the cast may have clicked in ways that shocked the producers, but he was different. Imagine it. Morocco. The desert's unrelenting heat baking into the earth, a landscape so raw and merciless that even the strongest competitors were questioning why they had signed their contracts. Boots pounded across gravel, sweat-stung eyes, and the sound of military whistles cut through the scorching air. Special Forces, world's toughest test, promised to strip contestants of ego and break them down into nothing but grit and determination. But the person who stole the spotlight wasn't one of the athletes, wasn't a model or an underdog fighting for redemption. No, it was Kody Brown. The same Kody who rose to fame on Sister Wives, the same man who once juggled 4 marriages and then let them unravel in front of millions. Now he was stepping out of cul-de-sacs and confessionals and into a battlefield-style competition, and already it was obvious, he was not blending in. The whispers weren't about his age or even his stamina. They were about his energy, his voice, his constant need to dominate. Sources claim that from the very first drill, Kody was loud, restless, and instantly rubbing castmates the wrong way. The producers had carefully assembled this cast, a mix of celebrities, athletes, and reality TV veterans designed to spark tension. But Kody? He wasn't just another personality in the lineup. He was a storm brewing in plain sight. With a reputation already drenched in years of arguments, ego, and that unforgettable knife in the kidneys rant burned into viewers' memories, he arrived with baggage that couldn't be hidden. For producers, it was gold. For his fellow cast, it was a warning. And as the group adjusted to the harsh Moroccan desert, Kody's inability to obey, to follow, to simply fall in line with military-style authority became clearer by the day. This was a man used to leading, used to commanding his wives and children as though his word was law. Now, stripped of control and forced to take orders, the cracks started showing, and yet the first signs of trouble didn't come from leaked footage or flashy previews. They surfaced quietly, almost slyly, when castmate Gia Giudice gave her fans a taste of the truth on her podcast. Yes, that Gia, daughter of Teresa Giudice, the table-flipping queen of New Jersey housewives. With her trademark mix of charm and bite, Gia casually described the cast as amazing, saying she couldn't really name anyone she disliked. But then came the pause, the smile, the shift in tone. She admitted there were definitely a few people who could get under your skin. She didn't name names, she didn't have to. The moment her words dropped, fans online swarmed the comments, immediately connecting the dots back to Kody Brown. Who else, they argued, had already made headlines? Before the season even aired, Gia's careful phrasing wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a breadcrumb, and fans know exactly how to follow a trail. The way she worded it carried weight. It didn't sound like she was describing a bad day, or even a harmless personality clash. No, it hinted at someone whose presence disrupted the balance of the entire group. And when you combine that with Kody's public history of fiery temper tantrums and relentless need to dominate every conversation, the picture sharpens into something undeniable. Gia didn't drag him by name, but she didn't need to. Reality. Stars know the game. They know how to stir gossip without lighting themselves on fire. And in that subtle art, Gia played her hand perfectly. Within hours, fan pages and Reddit threads exploded, posting old Sister Wives clips side by side with her comments, asking the question, who else could she possibly be talking about? But Gia wasn't the only one. Enter Brianna Chicken Fry. La Paglia, a social media star with her own reputation for speaking bluntly. She revealed on her platform that she broke down in tears, sobbing during the competition because of tension with one particular castmate. Again, no names. But paired with Gia's earlier tease, fans didn't hesitate for a second. They pointed directly at Kody. Two women from completely different backgrounds, both hinting at the same exact problem. That wasn't coincidence. That was a pattern. And insiders whispered that it wasn't just one big blowout argument fueling these rumors. It was death by 1,000 cuts, Kody's tone, his body language, his need to control group dynamics in an environment where control simply wasn't allowed. Remember, this wasn't Flagstaff. There were no TLC cameras to cushion him, no wives or children to orbit his authority, no couch interviews where he could spin the narrative in his favor. This was Morocco. This was brutal, stripped-down survival, in a desert where every sarcastic remark could feel like a grenade tossed into already fragile group chemistry. For Gia, his presence was someone who simply got under your skin. For Brianna, it was enough to bring her to tears. And when fans pieced the puzzle together, they saw not just a man struggling to adapt, but a man actively poisoning the atmosphere of a cast that otherwise managed to find unity. The picture forming wasn't of a few harmless clashes, it was of a group quietly uniting against the same disruptive force. And though no one had yet spoken Kody's name aloud on record, the silence of others spoke volumes. Because if two castmates were bold enough to hint publicly, imagine what the rest of them are keeping bottled up. And when the raw footage eventually airs, fans won't be asking whether Kody caused trouble. They'll be asking just how explosive it really got.
And it's not just about my character, it's about their character. And who wants to run deep here?
Special Forces isn't built for comfort. It's not about alliances, carefully staged confessionals, or producers massaging egos. It's about survival under shared misery. Contestants are stripped of phones, denied sleep, and shoved through punishing drills until their bodies ache and their minds fray. In those conditions, one person's bad energy doesn't just ruffle feathers, it poisons the whole camp. And that's exactly what insiders say happened when Kody Brown tried to position himself as a leader in group tasks. In an environment where the drill staff already enforced strict hierarchy, Kody's attempts to take charge created instant friction. This wasn't Sister Wives, where he could wave his hands in a living room and declare himself head of the family. This was Morocco, and the only voices that mattered were the ones barking orders in uniform. For years on Sister Wives, Kody called himself a leader. He preached fiery monologues, demanded respect, and framed his decisions as law. But in Morocco, that power meant nothing. Out here, he wasn't a patriarch or a star of TLC. He was just another body in dusty fatigues, expected to obey without question. Stripped of his authority, his habits still bled through. Rumor has it he questioned commands, pushed back, and even talked over drill staff. And suddenly, Brianna LaPaglia's confession about crying, sobbing, breaking down didn't sound like it came from sore muscles. It sounded like the suffocating weight of sharing a tent with someone who turned an already brutal experience into a nightmare. Most of the cast managed fine. Gia Giudice herself said everyone was amazing, except for a few people who could get under your skin. And when more than one voice points toward the same man, the message is clear. Kody wasn't just out of sync, he was isolated. Fans are now bracing to see whether the episodes will expose his outbursts unfiltered or whether editing will try to sand off the edges. Because if Gia and Brianna both left camp with the same impression, how many others are still biting their tongues until premiere night? The real cliffhanger isn't whether Kody clashed. It's why it kept happening, and what exactly set him off. This is where the structure of the show turns against him. On Sister Wives, if things boiled over in the kitchen, he could retreat to the safety of a confessional chair. Alone with the cameras, he spun narratives, raised his voice, gestured wildly, and made himself the hero of his own monologue. TLC would cut back and forth between his words and the wives' rebuttals, letting the audience pick a side. But on Special Forces, none of that exists. No soft-focus confessionals. No chance to plead your case with swelling music. Just boots, sweat, barked orders, and raw reactions. And that format, insiders claim, is where Kody fell apart. The cast weren't listening to his side of the story. They were watching it play out in real time, unedited and unpolished. Every outburst, every sarcastic jab, every attempt to motivate looked less like leadership and more like disruption. Athletes like Randall Cobb and Johnny Manziel were used to taking orders and working within a chain of command. Kody, on Wei Chi, the other hand, had spent decades controlling a household with almost no accountability. That dynamic didn't translate to the Moroccan desert. It backfired. And without confessionals to frame himself as misunderstood, all anyone saw was a man losing control. The parallels to his infamous knife in the kidneys rant were impossible to ignore. That meltdown, which millions saw as his lowest moment, was edited and packaged for television. But here, in a brutal desert camp, there was no safety net. Rumors swirled that every time Kody tried to push back, it only deepened the cracks. Castmates weren't seeing a misunderstood patriarch. They were seeing the raw, unfiltered Kody Brown. And if Gia and Brianna's words are any indication, that Kody didn't earn him allies. It left him standing alone, his voice stripped of authority and weighed down with resentment. And then came the combustible twist. Gia Giudice entered the same barracks. Yes, the Gia Giudice, table-flipping legend of Bravo, reality TV, warrior, and mother fiercely protective of her daughter Gia. Teresa isn't a woman who backs away from conflict. She's stared down betrayal, survived prison, and returned to Real Housewives of New Jersey fiercer than ever. Now picture her in the same desert camp as Kody Brown, a man who has built his entire persona on demanding respect. From the moment they landed in Morocco, it was a powder keg. Add Gia to the mix, loyal to her mother and already hinting about camp tensions, and suddenly you've got a mother-daughter duo with zero patience for Kody's posturing. This season's format only tightened the screws. Several contestants entered as pairs: Sean Johnson with Andrew East, Jesse James Decker with Eric Decker, and Teresa with Gia. Producers swore the competition judged each individual, but everyone knows alliances form naturally when family walks in together. And if you're Kody, already struggling, already clashing, those alliances don't just highlight your flaws, they magnify them. Every time he tried to assert himself, Teresa and Gia mirrored each other's eye rolls, pushing back in unison. For Kody, used to women who once deferred to him, this was unfamiliar and jarring. On Sister Wives, his wives might disagree, but they were bound to him by faith, family, and a shared life. Teresa and Gia owed him nothing. They weren't followers. They were competitors, equals, and in many ways, foils to everything he represents. And if insiders are right, their presence made Kody's isolation even sharper. Instead of being seen as the leader he claimed to be, he became the outsider, the odd man out in a camp that had no room for ego. Special Forces was never designed for comfort. It isn't about cozy alliances, staged confessionals, or producers giving cast members a safety net. It's about survival in misery. Phones are stripped away, sleep is stolen, and contestants are driven through grueling drills until their bodies ache and their minds collapse. In those brutal conditions, one person's negativity doesn't just annoy, it poisons the entire camp. And according to insiders, that's exactly what happened when Kody Brown tried to crown himself leader in team tasks. In a setting where drill sergeants already command the hierarchy, Kody's attempt to assert dominance sparked instant friction. This wasn't Sister Wives, where he could wave his hands and demand respect from a couch full of wives. This was Morocco, where the only voices that mattered were the ones barking orders in uniform. For over a decade on Sister Wives, Kody thrived on control. He gave fiery speeches, demanded loyalty, and insisted his decisions were final. But none of that power meant anything in the desert. Stripped of status, he was no patriarch, no TLC star, just another body in dusty fatigues, expected to obey, without question. Still, his old habits didn't disappear. Sources claim he second-guessed commands, pushed back at authority, and even talked over the drill staff. Suddenly, Brianna LaPaglia's tearful admission about crying, sobbing, breaking down didn't sound like it came from sore muscles. It sounded like the misery of sharing a tent with someone who made a nightmare worse. Most recruits handled the suffering as a team. Gia Giudice even said the group was amazing, except for a few people who could get under your skin. And when more than one voice points to the same man, the picture is clear. Kody wasn't fitting in, he was alienating himself. Now fans are waiting to see if the cameras will air his clashes raw, or if the editing room will soften his edges. Because if both Gia and Brianna left with the same impression, how many more recruits are holding back their truth until premiere night? The cliffhanger isn't if Kody clashed. It's why it kept happening and what exactly set him off. Here's the twist. The show's very structure exposed him. On Sister Wives, if tempers exploded in the kitchen, Kody could retreat to a confessional chair. Alone with the camera, he spun stories, waved his hands, and made himself the misunderstood hero. TLC edited his speeches against his wife's rebuttals, leaving the audience to decide who was right. But Special Forces has no safety net. No soft focus interviews, no swelling music, just barked orders, sweat, and raw reactions caught live, and that's where insiders say Kody crumbled. Castmates didn't hear his side of the story. They watched it unfold unfiltered. Every jab, every outburst, every motivational rant looked less like leadership and more like chaos. Athletes like Randall Cobb and Johnny Manziel thrived under a chain of command. Kody, who spent decades running his household unchecked, couldn't adjust. The Moroccan desert didn't reward control, it punished it. Without confessionals to protect him, what the others saw wasn't a misunderstood patriarch. It was Kody Brown, exposed and unraveling. The echoes of his infamous knife in the kidneys rant became impossible to ignore. On TLC, editing made that meltdown dramatic but digestible. Here, there was no polish, no sympathetic angle. Insiders whisper that every time he tried to rally or resist, it only deepened the cracks. Instead of gaining followers, he stood alone, weighed down by the resentment of his peers. And then came the spark that turned everything combustible. Gia Giudice. Yes, that Teresa, the table-flipping icon of Bravo, the fighter who's battled betrayal, survived prison, and returned fiercer than ever. Imagine her fiery personality colliding with Kody Brown, a man built on demanding respect. From the second they landed in Morocco, it was a powder keg waiting to explode. Add Gia to the mix, fiercely loyal to her mom and already hinting at drama, and suddenly you've got a mother-daughter duo with zero tolerance for Kody's posturing. This season's twist only raised the stakes. Several contestants entered as pairs: Sean Johnson with Andrew East, Jesse James Decker with Eric Decker, and of course Teresa with Gia. Producers claimed the show judged everyone individually. But let's be honest, alliances form naturally when family walks in together. And if you're Kody, already struggling, already clashing, those alliances don't just highlight your flaws, they magnify them. Every time he tried to assert control, Teresa and Gia mirrored each other's eye rolls, pushing back in unison. For Kody, who spent years with women who, even reluctantly, deferred, this was unfamiliar and jarring. On Sister Wives, his wives might resist, but faith and family still bound them. Teresa and Gia owed him nothing. They weren't partners or followers, they were equals, competitors, and in many ways, his foils. And according to insiders, their presence sharpened his isolation. Instead of being seen as a leader, he became the outsider, the odd man out, in a camp with no patience for ego. This version keeps the same flow and word count, but gives it more suspense and reality TV drama energy. So your audience feels like they're watching the episode unfold.